Hello! It's vintage computer time, because you seem to quite enjoy looking at the last lot, and I've got a load more of collected that I haven't shown you yet. So let's be all completionist and go through the remainder. And when I say vintage computers, I mean like 30 years old, from the 80s, that kind of thing. None of these computers are capable of playing PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, but they are capable of going beep and playing some rather nifty old retro games, and also some really terrible old retro games, which is why I bought them for book research. At least that's my excuse, and I am sticking to it. And once again, this video is sponsored by the lovely people at Snups, which is an app which you can download on your phone, be it Android or iOS, and it lets you keep track of your collections of things by using photos and that, which is not only fun because you can show them off to other people, but you can also use it as a depository of photos and that, in case something awful happens and you have to prove what you've got to the mighty insurance people. Also, it's completely free and doesn't have any in-app purchases or all that gubbins, which is very, very nice. We have our own group on it called The Brown Sofa, and we use that group in order to share various items, be they interesting retro items, weird action figures, or just amusing tat. It is very, very brown sofa-y. That's why I called it that, like I explained a minute ago. Let's have a quick look at it, in fact. So, these are things that I found particularly interesting on the old brown sofa, as in the virtual one, because I do not own any of these items. First up, from Mr. John Blanchard, is a Fujitsu 10-car Marty. Now that sounds like just a load of words put together randomly, but is in fact a version of an FM Towns Marty, which was a Japanese exclusive console, which didn't do very well if I recall correctly, and which has been repurposed to be a kind of in-car entertainment and navigation system. Mr. Blanchard himself says, "With the flop of the home consoles, Fujitsu passed the Marty technology to its car audio arm, Fujitsu 10. They used it to create the first in-car entertainment system, which cost approximately £5,000 at launch. Yes, it was ludicrously expensive, and as a result, the old Car Marty here is one of the rarest consoles in existence, I believe, because basically you'd have to have been richer than 14 gods in order to have afforded it. What else have we got? Oh, some rather nice Kotobukiya Robocop figures. Oh. And this is the Ed 260 from Robocop and the Ultra Police. I always wanted this figure because it's very, very pretty, but you just don't see them around anymore. Look, it even has gun caps in it so it can make clicky noises, but no, it's a really nice Ed 209 model, an actual chunky children's toy as well. They call it Ed 260, but I think it's pretty much identical to Ed 209 visually, which is the important thing. Oh, Cassette Man. Definitely not a rip-off of Soundwave from Transformers. Certainly not. Found by Mr. Duncan here. Headphone stereo may be changed into a robot. Well, it may be, it may not be. Buy it and find out. Now, Tamara here has shared what is probably the holy grail of Sega Saturn collecting in the UK, Deep Fear. Now, it's like a crappy Resident Evil knockoff with awful voice acting. Seriously, look it up. It's absolutely unbelievable. But it's the last game released in the UK for the Saturn, I believe, and it is super rare as a result, because it sold very few numbers. I do not have a copy myself, and it costs so much I probably never will. But we can at least look together at the awful cover, which features a green hand with really bad fingernails. It just looks like they've gone to the worst nail bar in the world. Anyway, that's enough of that for the time being. If you would like to play along, just download the Snups app and then follow us at The Brown Sofa Group. And I'm Stuart Ashen on it, because that's my name. Anyway, here's my vintage computers. Oh my goodness, the sofa looks different. Yes, this is because most of the computers are kept in a different place to the main brown sofa. And I tell you what, they're all a bit too bulky to move around en masse. Speaking of which, here's a portable computer. Portable in the sense that you can fit it in a car, and it doesn't take too much plugging in to get it up and running somewhere else. Welcome to the PPC640 from Amstrad, released in 1988. Oh, look at that beastie. Here we go. Amstrad PPC640. See, portable computer. Yeah, it's a bit bulky. It's got this massive handle that doesn't come off, and look, disk drives. So yeah, want to know how much this weighs? About 10 kilograms. And if you put batteries in, because it takes those old C-cell batteries, 10 of them in fact, that adds about another half a kilo. And also the battery life is under an hour. So yeah, portable. Anyway, in order to actually open it up, you have to flip it on its back like this. push these bits down, flip it up, and oh my goodness, look at that. I think we're actually going to have to fiddle with the camera there. There we go. So, oh actually, you can do it like this as well. Bring it forward and the screen comes up. How's that for portable? Well, it's got a keyboard, very springy keys. You wouldn't want to do a massive amount of typing on it, frankly, but it's not too bad. It's much better than like the early 80s ones. Yeah, what a machine this was. The idea was to produce, well, basically the cheapest portable computer possible, and this was it. It has this little 9-inch screen here. It's entirely black and white LCD, and it's not backlit at all. It's incredibly difficult to see it. It's basically black on dark green. It is not easy. CPU in it is an NEC V30, 8 megahertz, and it's got 640 kilobytes of RAM. In the last video, I kept referring to kilobytes as megabytes and really annoyed myself in editing, but hey, that's life. And this is apparently portable. Yeah, it's a heck of a machine, this, isn't it? If you have a look round, you can see you've got, wait for it, 2 whole disk drives that take the old 3¼ floppy disks. There, that was in case you didn't believe me. And you've got a few expansion ports, if I recall, but they're all sort of hidden around bits and bobs. It's a very, very odd little... Oh, here we are, actually. Oh, God, there's more than I remember. Phone, yes, this has a built-in modem, which was relatively rare at the time. And the weird thing is, it's 1200 baud, which is incredibly fast for the time. I mean, like, the average machine was like 300. It's that weird Amstrad thing of skimping on certain things and yet having some part of the machine being massively overspec'd. Expansion ports, DC in, that's where the current goes in. You can have an external monitor if you want, more ports, serial, parallel, different video port from a bit of the old VGA there. And yeah, oh, I just give myself a hernia, yep. Oh, what's in here? Oh, I remember there's more modem cables, because who wouldn't want yet more cables coming out of this thing? Well, that is what portability looked like in 1988. And I'll tell you what, this is what hernias felt like in 1988, and they still don't feel good. Going back quite a few years here to 1981, it's the TI-99-4A from Texas Instruments, a machine I don't know a terrific amount about because I only got this a couple of weeks ago. Basically, I never came up with games for terrible old games for the TI-99 that were really that bad, so I never looked that far into it, but I thought, you know what, it's time to jump into it, and I still haven't actually got any tapes or games or cartridges, see, solid state software, big old cartridge flap thing, to actually run it yet. So it remains properly untested, but I'm quite pleased to get one because it's one of these things. It was quite widely available in the UK. It didn't really sell. I think it was much more popular in the USA. It's actually based on the TI-99-4, which was a computer released in 1979. This is obviously slightly upgraded. It's got, if I recall, better keyboard, more expansion ports, has better graphics chip, blah blah blah. This has 16 kilobytes of RAM and a TI TMS 9900 3 megahertz CPU in it for all your power and running Crysis at 98 frames a second and all that kind of stuff. Keyboard ain't bad, a little bit springy. Very, very good for a 1981 machine, actually. Most of the British computers in 1981 had sort of chiclet keyboards where you had to basically hit it with a hammer and chisel to get it to register a bloody key press, but never mind. Right, let's have a look around it quickly. Power button, that's quite important for turning it on. You've got another cartridge slot stroke expansion porty thing at the side. At the back, I presume that's a joystick port, I haven't got into that yet. Power supply, obviously, that's got to be some sort of video output, hasn't it? Absolutely must. And another joystick port. And there you be. A fairly simple one, that. The games are quite colourful, and it seems to move sprites around quite nicely. They all seem fairly smooth. But as I said, not a computer I know much about as yet. Now here's a beast from 1986. Do you remember last time I showed you an Acorn Electron and said that was effectively a cut-down BBC Micro B? Well, this is effectively an upgraded BBC B. It is a BBC Master. And yes, that is the same BBC as the British Broadcasting Corporation. They had like a computer literacy project going on in the early 80s. Look, There's the little owl thing that they used as like a logo for it. So yeah, this was the more powerful and, dare I say it, slightly more professional version for sort of running bits of strange goodness knows what on. The processor is an MOS 65 SC12 running at 2 megahertz, and it's got 128 kilobytes of RAM. And my god, it was insanely expensive at the time. I mean, the BBC Micro was an expensive computer, but the Master, wow. It was not a cheap thing. Now, you may actually recall seeing a unit that looked exactly like this in our film, Ashens and the Quest for the Game Child, because the one we have to use in the library at the back is indeed a BBC Master. Interesting story. It was lent to us by somebody who said it was his granddad's, and his granddad was one of the people who actually worked on the BBC Micro project. Sadly, the computer itself didn't work, but it was a very nice thing. I don't know if he ever came and picked it up, actually. I don't know what happened to that. I hope he did, because it's probably been lost now because the production company's been and gone. But anyway, this is quite a nice keyboard. Yeah, it's not too smart. It's one of the better ones, I think. I am aware that in the last video I kept saying, this is good for an 80s keyboard for every single computer. But I generally did have computers with quite good keyboards in that one. Except for the Commodore 64, actually. I go back and change that, because I had to do quite a lot of typing on one recently. And the horrible spongy, springy keys drove me up the wall. Anyway, 2 cartridge slots. Look, now we're playing with power. Yeah, this is a massively expandable machine, to say the least. There's no ports on the sides. I can't remember what's around the back. There's got to be like your video and stuff at the very least, hasn't there? Yep, there we are. You have a hard wired in power cable. You've got your composite video, UHF if you want to tune it into your television, RGB for monitors, your analog out, RS423, you've got cassette, audio out, Econet, and on the bottom, I seem to remember there's a load more. I was not wrong. Yeah, there's auxiliary power there, and here you've got user port, printer, disk drive, tube, not sure what that is, some sort of monitoring thing maybe, and a 1 megahertz bus. Ah, man, that's a big thing. And if you've ever heard of the BBC's Doomsday Project, DOMES Day, not actual destruction of the world with that character from DC Comics, it's like it was how to describe it, like a massive multimedia project, and it was all stored on laser discs, and it had little write-ups and things about what Britain was like in the early 80s when the thing was made. There was also like a virtual art gallery you can move around, which is all any of us are interested in playing in it with. Doubtless all this stuff is available for free on a website somewhere these days, but it was quite an interesting thing, and that was all controlled by one of these little beauties. By little, I mean pretty bloody large, actually. Oh yeah, you may remember in the last video when I showed you my Toshiba MSX and said, sadly I don't have a Sony Hit-Bit, which was kind of the Rolls-Royce of MSX1s. Well, I do now, and it was given to me by somebody on the recent book tour, unbelievably, which was super kind of them. Unbelievable. Should mention, actually, the portable Amstrad PPC from earlier. That was sent in by a viewer as well. I've been very lucky on that front, and I tell you what, they're not lying when they say these things are lovely. So, if you remember from last time, this is an MSX, which is basically a sort of computer format Microsoft came up with, where different manufacturers made cross-compatible computers. It was very big in Japan, but didn't really catch on outside it. But my goodness, this is a nice machine. Lovely keys, massive, ridiculous cursors, because it's an MSX. You got your cartridge slot on there. Even the power button feels chunky and good. These are so nicely made, these really, really are. Ports-wise, you've got your controllers on the side, and you've got on the back a second cartridge port, which they keep covered. Get your screwdriver out if you do need to put something in it. Connect it to your television, connect it to a printer, connect it via something slightly higher quality video and audio. There's your tape deck, which is quite important. It's got SCART out. This computer was built in 1984, the old Hit-Bit 75B. 1984, and it's got bloody SCART on it. Amazing. And obviously there's a hardwired power switch on there, which is also fairly relevant. Nothing on the other side. Oh, dearie me. So yeah, 64 kilobytes of RAM, Zilog Z80A 3.6 megahertz CPU. It is a beautiful machine, and got to be probably the best made of the early 80s home micros. Also, I got this amusingly copyright-infringing version of Burger Time. Eaglesoft, we don't need no stinking license. Although it says Eaglesoft on there, and on here it says Bytebusters and Acosoft, so no idea. And now for something slightly different. It's another really long computer. It's from 1985, the Amstrad 64K CPC664 with one of those Zilog Z84 MHz CPUs in it. It's basically a 464 that I showed you last time, except they've swapped the built-in tape deck out for a built-in floppy drive. Also, you've got a more ergonomic keyboard and massive, massive chunky cursors, obviously copied from the old MSX there. Now, this was a surprisingly cheap computer when it came out, if I remember. It was like the cheapest disk system available. And they didn't discount the 464, so I imagine this seemed a bit of a bargain at the time. But Amstrad were very keen on pushing their 3-inch discs. These things. That was fun, wasn't it? In fact, you may remember at the time, Amstrad actually bought out Sinclair and released a Spectrum with a built-in 3-inch floppy drive on it, the Plus 3, because they really wanted one in every home. One of my favourite things on this is all the information stuck actually on the disk drive. You've got a master colour chart showing you which colour corresponds to which number when you're programming, and even the key numbers for the system. There's a little reference guide. So, ports-wise, on the side, you've got volume, you've got power, and then on the back, you've got a good old disk drive. Ooh, disk drive 2, it says there. Interesting. Monitor, you've got a fairly complicated power system, to say the least. Expansion port, you've got your printer port, you've got your tape, you've got your joystick, you've got your stereo for your audio, and that's about all you need, really. But yeah, it's an interesting machine, this one. I've still not actually got the disk drive up and running, because as anybody who has owned one of these will know, the has kind of a rubber band that runs the disk drive, and they degrade very, very quickly. I do have a replacement, just have to get around to putting it in. And then finally, I can play clacks. Hooray. Man, this computer really needs a good clean, particularly the keyboard here. But it has seen an awful lot of action over the last goodness knows how many years, because this is actually my old Atari 520 STE. Well, I say 520, I upgraded the RAM to 1 whole megabyte, which I think technically makes it a 1040. Dunno, I can't remember if there are any other differences. But I'll tell you what, still love those function keys after all these years and their cute diagonals. Key's a little bit too springy and spongy, as was a curse of computers around the time this was made. So yeah, this is from 1989, but really it's just a very slightly upgraded version of a computer from 1985. It's got a Motorola 68000 processor running at 8 MHz, which is slightly faster than the around 7 MHz the Amiga had, which is why if you see a game which is running pure 3D stuff, it tends to run a little bit smoother on the ST, but it obviously lacked all the nifty graphics and sound custom chips of the Amiga, which is why the games generally look massively inferior if you've got a version on both. As I said, this is an STE, the E standing for enhanced. If you want to know what ST stands for, that stands for 1632, which are like bus speeds of the computer or something, if I recall correctly. And this is the first proper 16-bit computer I've shown you, actually. Although saying that, earlier, the TI 994A technically 16-bit. I think, in fact, it was the first 16-bit computer in history. But it's a little bit of, well, technically 16-bit, because a lot of it was still running slower and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, this is like the real deal in that sense. So yeah, this was an enhanced version of the STFM, which was basically a standard Atari ST, but it had an F, which was a built-in floppy disk, and an M, which was the built-in modulator so you could plug it directly into a normal television. The actual enhancements are pretty slim, to be honest with you. It's got more colours. There's a blitter chip in it, which helps move data around in graphics memory. It does PCM audio, if I remember. Oh, and of course, the most important bit for me, the memory are on standardised SIM chips instead of stuff kind of soldered to the motherboard and a pain in the arse like the STFMs, because I actually had a standard ST before I bought this, and I really wanted to upgrade the memory on it, and I basically couldn't. Because of the model it was virtually impossible. I had kits and nothing worked, and oh, it was ridiculous. So I ended up buying like the STE, which was one on the market at the time, with the easier upgrade and the upgrade at the same time. Could have bought the 1040, but I think that was much more expensive than buying the standard and getting an upgrade, if I recall correctly. Because this computer is the one that really got me into making stupid things with computers, something you are suffering from right at this second. So yes, it's got various ports. Would you like to see the hidden ones underneath? look, that's where the joystick goes in, and that was the mouse, or you could plug Player 2's joystick into it. That was a massive pain in the bum, because going under here, where they're almost totally inaccessible, you'd end up busting the ports, which is why I bought this splitter, and it let you have technically both plugged in at once, but in reality you would only have one to interfere with each other, but it meant you could just remove them from here as opposed to going under and breaking everything. You've got your floppy drive on the side, you've got a modem thing, never used that one, printer, hard drive, floppy disk, television, monitor. Monitor's interesting on the STs because most of the monitors were monochrome ones which ran in a special high-res mode, which was very crispy clear at the time, but obviously literally just black and white, not even the shades of grey in between, so not a good one for gaming. Left and right audio, power, actually those I think were new on the STE, if I recall. You've got your power, you've got your reset button, and that's about the lot. Oh wait, until you get to the side, cartridge port, and also MIDI in and out, which is why the ST was a popular computer for musicians back in the day, because you had MIDI ports built in on the side of it. And also the STE had these added enhanced joystick ports, which I don't think did anything ever. I think the only use they ever had for them was you could buy an adapter to plug normal joysticks into them. But there we go. The mighty ST. I did love it so, which is why I've still got it. So, that be some of my old computers, folks. If you would like to see more of such things, and in fact more stuff in general that I've collected over the years, and also interesting things collected by many, many other people, to have a download of the old Snups app and join us on the brown sofa. And why not show off interesting items you've got while you're there?
Subscribe for more.